person who manipulates instead of communicating is someone who distorts reality to serve their own agenda. They do not engage in conversation with the intention of finding truth or understanding. They speak with the intention of controlling outcomes. When you interact with them, you may feel confused rather than enlightened, as if something is subtly off but difficult to pinpoint. Their words are carefully crafted to shift responsibility, create guilt, or pressure you into decisions that serve their interests. This type of individual relies on tactics such as gaslighting, where they make you question your own perception of reality. You may recall an event one way, but they will insist it happened differently. Over time, you start to doubt your own memory, and in doing so, you become more susceptible to their influence. They will use selective truth, omitting key details while presenting their narrative in a way that favors them. They are not necessarily outright liars, though they often are, but more commonly, they are skilled distorters of truth. Another method they use is emotional manipulation. They exploit your empathy, making you feel responsible for their emotions and actions. If they do something wrong, they will position themselves as the victim, shifting the blame onto you or external circumstances. If you express frustration, they will accuse you of being overly sensitive or dramatic. The goal is to make you question your own judgment while allowing them to escape accountability. These individuals also employ passive aggressiveness rather than direct confrontation. Instead of saying what they mean, they imply, suggest, or guilt trip. They may say something cruel but disguise it as a joke, leaving you uncertain about whether you should be offended. When you call them out, they will claim you are overreacting, making it seem as though the issue lies with you rather than with them. People who manipulate instead of communicate often have an inflated sense of superiority. They believe they are intellectually or emotionally ahead of others, and as a result, they justify their deceptive behavior. They do not see manipulation as immoral because, in their view, it is simply a strategy to get what they want in a world where, as they see it, only the strong survive. Their mindset is rooted in control rather than collaboration. They will often twist words to make it seem like they are the rational, composed party while you are the irrational one. They may feign concern for your well-being while subtly undermining your confidence. This is particularly dangerous because it creates an illusion of care, making it harder for you to recognize their true intentions. You may find yourself second-guessing every decision, wondering if you are in the wrong even when your instincts tell you otherwise. The key sign that you are dealing with a manipulative person is that conversations with them do not feel constructive. Instead of resolving conflicts, discussions leave you drained, uncertain, or guilty. If someone constantly makes you feel this way, it is crucial to recognize that their words are not aimed at clarity, but at control. A person who avoids responsibility and shifts blame onto others is fundamentally incapable of self-reflection. They do not see themselves as contributors to their own failures, nor do they acknowledge their role in any conflict or mistake. Instead, they externalize blame, pointing fingers at circumstances, other people, or abstract concepts like society, luck, or fate. This pattern of behavior is not just an occasional defense mechanism, it is a deeply ingrained way of thinking that allows them to evade accountability while maintaining an illusion of personal righteousness. When something goes wrong, their first instinct is not to analyze their own actions, but to find a scapegoat. If they fail at work, it is because their boss is unfair or their colleagues are incompetent. If a relationship falls apart, it is always because the other person was too demanding, too emotional, or too flawed. Even in trivial matters, they struggle to acknowledge fault, twisting narratives in a way that absolves them of any wrongdoing. This allows them to maintain their self-release without having to confront uncomfortable truths. This tendency is particularly evident in their response to criticism. Rather than considering whether there is merit to the feedback, they react with defensiveness, deflection, or even aggression. They may dismiss criticism outright, arguing that the person offering it is biased or uninformed. If they cannot outright reject it, they will shift focus, to external factors, claiming that stress, bad timing, or someone else's interference caused the issue. This ensures that they never have to engage in genuine self-improvement because in their mind, they are never truly at fault. Blame shifting is also a tactic they use to maintain control in relationships. When conflicts arise, they will manipulate the situation so that the other person feels responsible, even when the problem was caused by their own actions. If they are caught lying, they will say they only did so because they were forced into it by the other person's behavior. If they neglect responsibilities, they will claim that the expectations placed on them were unfair to begin with. They create an environment where those around them feel guilty for even holding them accountable. This behavior often stems from a deep-seated fear of inadequacy. Admitting fault requires a level of humility and self-awareness that they lack. Acknowledging mistakes means confronting the possibility that they are flawed, and instead of dealing with this, they construct elaborate justifications to maintain their sense of superiority. They would rather live in a distorted version of reality where they are never wrong than face the discomfort of self-improvement. Over time, this pattern isolates them. People around them grow tired of their inability to take responsibility, and relationships suffer as trust erodes. In professional settings, colleagues and employers lose respect for them. Instead of growing and learning from their experiences, they become trapped in a cycle of denial and blame, never truly progressing, because they refuse to recognize the role they play in their own failures. A person who seeks power over truth is not interested in what is objectively real, but in what benefits them. Their primary concern is maintaining control, whether in relationships, workplaces, or broader social dynamics. They manipulate facts, distort narratives, and selectively acknowledge reality to shape the world in a way that serves their desires. The pursuit of truth requires humility, the willingness to accept being wrong, and the capacity to adjust one's beliefs when confronted with evidence. Someone who prioritizes power over truth refuses to do this because admitting fault or recognizing an inconvenient reality threatens their sense of dominance. Such individuals are often skilled at rhetoric. They do not argue to discover what is right, but to win. Their words are carefully chosen to persuade, not to reveal. If a fact challenges their authority, they either dismiss it outright, reframe it to fit their narrative, or attack the credibility of the source presenting it. They do not debate in good faith because their goal is not mutual understanding, but control over perception. If they cannot win with logic, they will resort to emotional manipulation, intimidation, or deception. They tend to thrive in environments where power is prioritized over integrity. In workplaces, they maneuver themselves into positions where they can dictate outcomes rather than earn them. They take credit for others' work, downplay their mistakes, and make decisions based on loyalty rather than merit. In relationships, they withhold or distort information to keep others uncertain and dependent on them. If confronted, they shift the conversation away from facts and onto emotions, making their accuser feel guilty or unreasonable for questioning them. This type of person is particularly dangerous because they can appear highly competent and persuasive. Their confidence often masks their dishonesty, making them seem like strong leaders or wise decision makers. They understand that many people are drawn to certainty, so they present themselves as unwavering and decisive even when they are wrong. The truth is flexible to them, a tool to be reshaped rather than a principle to be upheld. They will contradict themselves without hesitation if it serves their immediate interests, relying on the assumption that people will either not notice or will be too intimidated to call them out. When faced with an undeniable truth that threatens their authority, they react with hostility or deflection. They may attack the credibility of the person presenting the truth, label them as biased, or dismiss them as misinformed. If that fails, they shift the goalposts, changing the argument entirely to avoid being proven wrong. They rely on distraction, confusion, and division to keep their grip on power. The long-term effect of their behavior is a corrupt environment where truth becomes secondary to influence. Those around them may either conform to their distortions out of fear or become exhausted trying to fight against them. The more power they accumulate, the harder it becomes to challenge them because they surround themselves with people who either benefit from their deception or are too afraid to oppose them. A person who exploits trust and kindness operates with a calculated approach, using the goodwill of others as a tool for their own benefit. Trust and kindness are fundamental elements of human relationships, built on the assumption that people act in good faith. However, these individuals recognize that such virtues make people vulnerable, and they take advantage of this vulnerability to manipulate, control, and extract value from others without reciprocation. They are not interested in genuine connection or mutual support. They see relationships as transactions where they should always come out ahead. Their manipulation often begins subtly. They present themselves as likable, trustworthy, and in need of help or support. They might share personal struggles to elicit sympathy, positioning themselves as victims to gain emotional leverage. Once they establish a bond of trust, they start pushing boundaries. They ask for favors that gradually increase in scale, relying on the other person's kindness to avoid rejection. If questioned, they use guilt, claiming that a refusal would make them feel abandoned or betrayed. One of their key tactics is selective reciprocity. Early on, they may offer small acts of generosity to create the illusion of a balanced relationship. But over time, the balance shifts in their favor. They take more than they give, yet make the other person feel as though they are the selfish one for hesitating to comply. They create an environment where their needs always take priority, and anyone who resists is made to feel unreasonable. These individuals also master the art of playing the victim. If confronted about their behavior, they shift the focus onto their supposed suffering, making the accuser feel guilty for even questioning them. They twist situations so that they appear mistreated rather than manipulative. This ensures that others continue to tolerate their exploitation out of fear of seeming unkind or insensitive. They weaponize the very empathy that makes people human, using it as a shield against accountability. They also have a way of making others question their own instincts. A person may sense that they are being used, but hesitate to act on that intuition because the manipulator has conditioned them to believe that asserting themselves is cruel. This is a common pattern in toxic friendships, family dynamics, and romantic relationships. The victim of the exploitation begins to doubt their own judgment, unsure whether they are overreacting or being unfair. This self-doubt keeps them trapped in the manipulator's cycle of taking without giving. Over time, their actions leave a trail of exhausted, emotionally drained people who feel unappreciated and taken advantage of. Those who finally break free often realize that the relationship was never about mutual care, it was always about control. The manipulator moves on to new targets, repeating the same cycle with fresh individuals who have not yet recognized their tactics. They do not seek meaningful bonds, they seek utility, and once someone ceases to be useful, they are discarded without hesitation or remorse. A habitual liar does not see dishonesty as an occasional necessity, but as a fundamental part of their existence. They do not lie only when they are in trouble or when they need to cover up a mistake. Lying becomes their default mode of communication. For them, the truth is not something to be upheld, but something to be bent, reshaped, or discarded entirely whenever it suits their needs. They craft their own reality, one where facts are irrelevant and only their version of events matter. At first, their lies may seem small and inconsequential, perhaps exaggerations to make themselves look better, or omissions of details that could paint them in a negative light. But over time, their dishonesty escalates. They fabricate events, create false narratives, and tell conflicting stories without concern for consistency. They count on the fact that most people will not scrutinize their words too closely. If caught in a contradiction, they either deny what they previously said, gaslight the person questioning them, or create a fresh lie to cover up the old one. Their dishonesty is not limited to external situations. It extends to their own self-perception. They lie to themselves just as easily as they lie to others, convincing themselves that their actions are justified or that their fabrications are harmless. This self-deception allows them to continue down a path of manipulation without feeling the weight of guilt. They may even believe their own falsehoods. making it nearly impossible to reason with them. A person who is aware that they are lying can, in theory, be confronted with the truth. But someone who has convinced themselves that their lies are reality is beyond reasoning. One of the most dangerous aspects of a habitual liar is that they make others question their own sanity. People who interact with them frequently may begin to doubt their own memory, instincts, or ability to judge a situation accurately. This is particularly damaging in close relationships where trust should be a foundation. When a person realizes they have been deceived repeatedly, it leaves them feeling betrayed and destabilized and deeply uncertain about who they can trust. These individuals often lie not just to escape accountability, but to control those around them. By spreading misinformation, they shape perceptions, create conflicts, and position themselves in a way that benefits them. They may paint themselves as victims to gain sympathy, or as heroes to gain admiration. Their lies are designed to manipulate emotions, ensuring that others see them in the way they want to be seen, rather than as they truly are. Over time, a habitual liar leaves behind a pattern of broken trust and damaged relationships. Those who once believed in them eventually see the inconsistencies, the contradictions, and the empty promises. Yet the liar does not stop. They simply move on to new people, new situations, and new opportunities to deceive. Their lies are not just tools, they are the very foundation upon which their life is built, and they will continue to weave their web of falsehoods as long as they can get away with it. A person who enjoys the suffering of others operates with a mindset that is fundamentally destructive. Rather than seeking to build, support, or uplift, they take pleasure in tearing others down. Their sense of satisfaction is not derived from personal growth or achievement, but from the pain, failure, or misfortune of those around them. This is not simply a case of indifference to suffering, it is an act of enjoyment of it, a deep-rooted tendency to feel powerful when others are weak, humiliated, or in distress. At the core of this behavior is a profound lack of empathy. While most people feel discomfort or sorrow when witnessing another person's suffering, this type of individual feels amusement, pleasure, or even excitement. They do not merely ignore the pain of others, they seek it out, encourage it, or orchestrate. They may engage in bullying, verbal abuse, or manipulation to push people into vulnerable states. If someone expresses sadness, fear, or despair, they do not offer comfort. They escalate the situation, deriving pleasure from the visible distress. Their actions are often masked under the guise of humor or justification. They may claim that they are just joking when they mock someone's insecurities or weaknesses. They might argue that their cruelty is deserved, shifting the blame onto the victim and avoiding accountability. This allows them to continue their behavior without facing the social consequences of being openly malicious. By disguising their enjoyment of suffering behind excuses, they manipulate others into believing that they are not as harmful as they truly are. In many cases, their desire to see others suffer stems from a deep-rooted sense of inadequacy or resentment. They do not possess the ability to elevate themselves, so they compensate by bringing others down. Rather than striving to improve their own lives, they sabotage the progress of others. They might spread rumors, create unnecessary conflicts, or undermine people who are succeeding. Their motivation is not self-improvement, but destruction, and they feel powerful when they see others crumble under the weight of their cruelty. These individuals often target those they perceive as vulnerable. They prey on people who are empathetic, kind, or lacking in confidence because they know these individuals are less likely to fight back. If confronted, they react with denial, deflection, or even more aggression. They may gaslight their victims into believing they are overreacting or that the cruelty was never intended. This psychological manipulation allows them to continue their behavior while making it difficult for others to call them out. Their presence creates toxic environments, whether in personal relationships, workplaces, or social circles. The people around them become anxious, insecure, or fearful of making mistakes, knowing that any sign of weakness will be exploited. Over time, this erodes trust and stability, leaving behind a landscape of fractured relationships and emotional damage. While most people strive to build meaningful connections, they thrive in situations of chaos, pain, and destruction, feeding off the suffering they create and ensuring that those around them never find peace. A person who manipulates others for personal gain does not see relationships as mutual exchanges of trust, support, or respect. Instead, they view people as tools, means to an end, resources to be exploited for their own benefit. Their primary concern is what they can extract from others, whether it be power, money, status, or emotional control. They are not interested in fairness or reciprocity. Their focus is entirely on how they can twist situations and people to serve their self-interest. Manipulators are skilled at reading people. They understand human psychology well enough to know how to push the right buttons, appeal to emotions, and exploit vulnerabilities. They are often charming, persuasive, and seemingly trustworthy, traits that allow them to gain access to others' lives without immediate suspicion. Once they establish trust, they begin subtly influencing their targets, steering them in directions that serve their own agenda while making it seem as though the decisions are voluntary. One of their key tactics is emotional manipulation. They know how to make people feel guilty, obligated, or fearful to get what they want. If they need something, they may play the victim, exaggerating their struggles or fabricating crises to elicit sympathy. If someone resists their influence, they might resort to guilt-tripping, making the person feel selfish or unkind for not complying. In more extreme cases, they use fear, implying consequences, social isolation, or emotional withdrawal to pressure people into submission. Another common strategy is gaslighting, a psychological technique where they distort reality to make others doubt their own perceptions. They deny past statements, twist facts, or accuse others of being overly sensitive, causing their victims to second-guess their own memories and emotions. Over time, this can erode a person's confidence and make them more susceptible to control. By creating confusion and self-doubt, the manipulator ensures that their victims remain dependent on them for validation and direction. Manipulators are also highly opportunistic. They seek out people who are kind, empathetic, or struggling with self-esteem, as these individuals are more likely to tolerate their behavior. They may present themselves as mentors, friends, or protectors, only to later reveal their true motives when their victims are too entangled to easily escape. In professional settings, they take credit for others' work, sabotage competitors, or position themselves as indispensable by creating crises only they can resolve. In relationships, they use love and affection as weapons. They shower their targets with attention and praise when compliance is high, but withdraw affection when resistance arises. This creates an addictive cycle where the victim constantly seeks their approval, hoping to regain the warmth that was once freely given. By controlling the emotional environment, they ensure that their targets remain focused on pleasing them rather than recognizing the exploitation taking place. Those who fall victim to manipulation often feel drained, confused, and unappreciated, yet struggle to pinpoint exactly why. The manipulator ensures that blame is always placed elsewhere, avoiding accountability while continuing their patterns of deceit and control. Their success depends on others not recognizing what is happening until it is too late, and by the time their true nature is revealed, significant damage has already been done. A person who refuses to take responsibility for their actions creates an environment where blame, denial, and deflection replace accountability. They do not acknowledge their mistakes, nor do they seek to correct them. Instead, they shift fault onto others, manipulate circumstances, and avoid consequences at all costs. This refusal to accept responsibility is not merely an occasional lapse in judgment, but a deeply ingrained pattern that defines how they interact with the world. They have an excuse for everything. When they fail, it is always because of someone else. Their boss was unfair, their co-workers were incompetent, their family did not support them, or the system was against them. If they hurt someone, they justify it by claiming they were provoked, misunderstood, or acting in self-defense. They rarely, if ever, admit wrongdoing. In their minds, they are the victim of circumstances rather than the architect of their own failures. One of their primary defense mechanisms is blame shifting. If confronted, they immediately redirect focus onto another person or external factor. If they make a mistake at work, they accuse a colleague of providing bad information. If they betray a friend, they argue that the friend was too sensitive or overreacting. This tactic serves two purposes. It absolves them of guilt and creates confusion, making it harder for others to hold them accountable. They also use denial as a strategy. Even when presented with clear evidence of their mistakes, they will dismiss it outright. They may claim they never said or did something, even when there is proof to the contrary. They rewrite history in real time, insisting that their version of events is the only truth. This can be particularly damaging to those around them, as it creates doubt and frustration. When someone repeatedly denies reality, it wears down the people trying to hold them accountable, leading to exhaustion and ultimately resignation. Another common tactic is playing the victim. When their behavior is questioned, they position themselves as the one who is actually suffering. They focus on how difficult their life is, how much stress they are under, or how unfairly they have been treated. This tactic is designed to elicit sympathy and shift attention away from their actual wrongdoing. Instead of answering for their actions, they make the conversation about their own pain, deflecting responsibility in the process. These individuals often surround themselves with enablers, people who either fail to see their manipulations or are too intimidated to challenge them. Over time, they create an environment where accountability is discouraged and their behavior is normalized. This allows them to continue avoiding consequences, reinforcing their belief that they are never at fault. Their refusal to take responsibility ultimately damages relationships, workplaces, and social structures. Those around them grow resentful, exhausted, and frustrated by the constant excuses and lack of growth. The people who enable them may eventually become scapegoats themselves, as the blame will always need to be assigned somewhere. Without accountability, there is no progress, only repetition of the same destructive patterns, leaving behind a trail of broken trust and unresolved conflicts.